okay, this is where the business can grow to. How do I work backwards from this in order to bring in the right team, the number of people? How do I engineer this business for success, stage by stage? You just have to do your own due diligence, just as the fund is assessing you. Go speak to the other founders that are on that portfolio. Being posed questions routinely, like really targeting like my identity or like what made you start Kalda.
Yeah.
And I didn't have full answers for these. I'm literally still going through my own journey of discovery for myself, like really on.
This is the real of building a conscious business. The hard-earned lessons, unfiltered truths, and impactful guests. Welcome to Confessions of a Conscious CEO. I interview my friend and client, Dan, the founder of Kalda, in this episode. Kalda is a LGBTQIA+ self-therapy app, and in this episode, Dan shares what prompted him to start this business. He also goes deep on his fundraising journey, everything from what made him decide to raise outside capital to how he determined how much he needed to raise, how he got better at pitching and securing venture dollars, as well as how he could spot when an investor wasn't good for his business. He also talks a lot about how he balanced fundraising, which can be a full-time job, alongside running his business as well. We also talked about what it was like working together to create his go-to-market strategy. And speaking of go-to-market, in case you didn't hear, I have a brand new free course called GTM Essentials. If you are a startup founder looking to grow and scale your business, this is going to be such a game changer. In this course, I will help you launch and build a business that is self-sustaining in terms of sales and revenue without wasting your time or energy. I teach you how to identify and solve the right problems for your customers, create products and offers that people are actually excited to buy, build a brand that is able to command premium prices, and we will work together to create a sales funnel that works for you in the background so that you can have more consistent sales. Finally, we tie it all together by marketing and building a content machine that consistently brings you new qualified leads. I am incredibly proud of this free course. There's 12 amazing bite-sized lessons. You will also get a complimentary Notion workbook, and there's exercises in there that you can work through to implement everything I'm teaching you. I have poured 15 plus years of building billion-dollar brands, as well as advising startups and scaling my own ventures. Fast track your success, learn from my mistakes, and you can enroll right now via the link down below or at selinaho.com/GTM-essentials. I can't wait to support you inside this free course, and without any further ado, let's dive into the episode. Welcome, Dan, to Confessions of a Conscious CEO. I'm so glad you are finally here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, of course. We've been friends for a while now, and then we found out that we were both in the startup space, which is so funny. Right? We had no idea.
We'd just been at a house party
together.
We met several house parties or like different events, and then finally we like had a really deep conversation. I was like, oh my god, hang on, you do this, I do this.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And I think we were both going through hiring issues.
Yes.
And that's what bonded us together.
Yes, that's exactly it. I think you had this really wonderful framework that you just immediately sent to me afterwards.
We met through our mutual friend, Karen. Shout out to Karen if you're watching. We love Karen. But and we met in Prague in a hot tub, and the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
Yes. So we're here today because you started Kalda. And I'm pointing at this because that's the hat you gave me from your launch party.
It is the hat, yes. I've been distributing them out.
And so can you tell me more about Kalda, why you started it, what you're all about?
Yeah. So Kalda is an LGBTQIA+ mental health platform, and we're providing a digital form of therapy to support low to medium levels of anxiety and depression for everyone in the community.
Amazing. And how did you start Kalda? Was there an experience you had? Was there a really big problem you were trying to solve?
I really feel like my whole life has been kind of leading up to setting up Kalda. When I was younger, a friend from school was made homeless after they were outed, and then they came and lived with me and my family. And I was so grateful to my parents taking him in. He came from a really religious family, and ultimately his brother found out that he was gay, and then he outed him to the whole family. And he was immediately kicked out of the house. So I just remember really clear as day opening the door, and there he is, just without a home, And immediately, my sister and my mum, like they really rallied around him really quickly, and you're coming in, you're going to stay here.
I think that's so amazing that your family accepted him as their own. And I think that's so beautiful and so touching. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, no worries.
So you hinted at this already, but you going through this then started Kalda. And also we talked about before, you didn't see a lot of people like you out there. And so you felt, as a result of that too, a bit shy about talking about Kalda and being the face of Kalda. And so where are you at now on that? And have you had a little bit more self-confidence to kind of fully step into the role? Or is it still a work in progress? And if it is, that's okay too. But
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about that too.
I feel so much more like open and like more myself and way more like relaxed. I think it was just an air of just like constantly feeling anxious about, hey, I'm working through this myself,
Yeah.
and then being posed questions routinely, like really targeting like my identity or like what made you start Kalda.
Yeah.
And I didn't have full answers for these, I'm literally still going through my own journey of discovery for myself,
Yeah.
like really on. But now we're like 5 years into the journey and
Yeah.
it's now become effortless. It's more me
Yeah.
and I feel just calm.
That's so
I think
good.
it's just that anxiety, feeling like you constantly need to like come out to people.
Mhm.
It just feels like a weight when you want to tell somebody, but you're not sure of whether or not you can.
Mm.
And then when you do, it doesn't even matter what the response is. It's like you've done something for you and that weight is lifted. So no matter what the response is, be it positive or negative, the pain of holding it and hiding it and like suppress who you are, gone. It's something that I see throughout the community and throughout my friendships in particular, like this air of unable to express yourself fully. Like self-expression, people-pleasing, like these are things that I just see routinely because we're just unable to like show ourselves.
And I can really appreciate in the early days how you must have felt, because a lot of founders, they're told you need to be front-facing, you need to build your brand, you need to build your personal brand. And then the question of why you started your startup always comes up. And then if you don't have that personal tie and you're still kind of working through it yourself, I can imagine you would feel really anxious about that. A lot of founders are working through kind of their own stories while they're building their startups. Your situation, though, is more nuanced and layered because there is so much stigma and taboo around it. So I can appreciate how difficult that must have been. But it seems like with time and opening up to the right people and being in safe spaces where you feel accepted, that has helped you build the confidence over the years. Is that correct?
You nailed it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think part of the journey has just been finding safe spaces, finding community. And then as soon as you found those, like you really see what ignites, that spark for you. And I've always felt as founders, you kind of go into building a business to like build one. But then in reality, like the business ultimately builds you.
Yeah.
It's a really nice kind of mirroring in that respect.
Well, thank you for sharing. I'm really proud of you. And I always say building a startup is like the deep end of personal development. Like you have to face all of your demons and get over them so that you can be the best founder you can be. So really proud of you.
Thanks, Selena.
Yeah. Let's move into fundraising, because I know that has been a topic that you've worked really, really hard at. You've also learned so much from, and I think our listeners would benefit from it. Why did you decide to raise money for Kalda?
I would say you've got two paths. You could bootstrap and then there's external capital. The opportunity that I had was to raise external capital. What does that capital allow you to do? First thing is for you to be able to work full time on it, because if you're bootstrapping, the very sensible option is not to do it full time. You're doing it part time as you're building up the business. This gave us a runway, and no matter how short it was initially, we had a platform where we're just looking at the problem and we're trying to solve it every day. And I think there's something so fast and adaptive, and it's very reactive in that space. And so taking external capital allows you to do that. And I would say then the flip side is with that capital, you want to be moving really quickly. You want to front load that experience, particularly with the venture model as a whole. It's looking at a time horizon of 5 to 7 years. So build this business as fast as possible. And if it doesn't stick, that's okay, because that's the nature of VC capital. But then that's quite challenging when you're doing something for social impact. Then you need to kind of reconcile VC dreams and ambition with care and the love that you want to bring into the product, and also for the people that you're doing it for. Knowing that there are 400 million openly out LGBTQ plus people. There's so many without access to mental health support. You're like compelled to that mission. So capital, to try and help as many people as possible, work full time at speed, but then balancing it with the flip side of like, you really care about this and you want to help people.
And let's talk about that, because I've always said there's so many more funds now, be it climate funds or social impact funds. They genuinely do want to invest in businesses that are doing better. But inherently, the VC model is they invest and then they want to return, to your point, ASAP, ideally within 5 years or 7. And then with social impact and even climate businesses, that runway is sometimes too short. There's an inherent flaw in this business model. And I think unless VCs are willing to either extend the time horizon or maybe not look at it only as return, which I think is very unappetizing for people to listen to if they're in the VC space, it can be really difficult. So how did you navigate this as you are a social impact business and you're doing such incredible work? Like, how did you balance, okay, I need to raise money for the business, but also I need to find the right fit and have people understand that this is going to take time and we're not just trying to make money here, like we're trying to actually help people.
We've always been very open about like what is our most important metric, and that is the number of people accessing support and the actual impact on symptoms, be it anxiety or depression. That's our guiding light. But then underneath that, we've got the more venture metrics, the revenue, the users, and so on.
Were there like certain funds that were more open to it that you were approaching? Is that also something that people can do?
I think there are a lot of funds out there that are balancing impact and ESG into their thesis, right? As you mentioned, like the climate funds, they have their thesis and it's about balancing the for-profit aims, the impact aims. You don't have to have everything perfect in your first round. You want to basically lay the foundation for like a business that will grow and scale round after round. So it's about, have I got a real problem that I'm solving? And have I got a solution that is like lining up towards something that we would call product market fit? And then it's about scaling that, all of the systems that you've built to try and figure that out. I'm kind of at that stage. The area of scaling is still like dip your toe in a lot, particularly in really early rounds. You're trying to straddle both of those things, but it's not necessarily the right way to do it. You want to really nail product market fit in the first round.
Talk about product market fit later, but on fundraising, how did you decide how much you were going to raise? Because I think a lot of founders, they're just like, I'm going to raise $1 million or whatever it is. Did you go about it methodically? Did you have like a process you went about it?
The temptation is like, yep, I'm just going to pick this number. A lot of founders like those big round numbers. $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, like it will be these numbers. The process that I went by is ultimately to go to my financial model and I input all of the known assumptions that I had. And I said, okay, this is where the business can grow to. How do I work backwards from this in order to bring in the right team, the number of people? How do I engineer this business for success stage by stage? We're going to be a 50 million annual business in this number of years. How many people are going to need to support that? And then I slowly work backwards. As I was doing it, how many rounds do I need to go through? How many stages of capital do I need to raise in order to get to that stage? So thinking very, very clearly about at what stage am I going to grow the team beyond 6 people and then scale it up to 20? And then at what stage am I going to need more in order to handle the amount of volume that we're receiving, either be it customer support or like just the demands on the tech side? Eventually you come down to pre-seed that number and it will find itself. Are you going to be in a co-founding relationship? So is it just going to be the two of you like building this for the first 2 years? Or are you going to have like trying to get to a team of 4 and then really push it? That then should dictate, I want 2 years of runway. So how much money do I need if I'm not making any revenue to get to the next stage? That's going to be that first number. You know, for us, initially it was like 800 and then I brought it back down to about 500. The amount of capital that you're trying to raise, it gives you your valuation. Because you want to be as incentivized and the fund wants you as incentivized to keep going because there's a big pie that you still dilute down over the next couple of rounds. I think what they typically say is each round you're going to be expecting a dilution of about 20%. So whatever the number is, that will produce your valuation.
Thanks for so succinctly walking that through. I think that will be really helpful for a lot of folks. And I also wanted to talk about dilution as well, because this is so important. Because if you don't know at the pre-seed stage, if you overvalue your company or you give away too much equity, it's not great for you later on if you continue to raise. And so do you want to talk quickly just a little bit about that?
Oh my gosh. I think the classic one, and we've seen a lot of this in the last 5 years of companies overvaluing themselves, coming out of COVID, we saw some companies really explode, like your Hopins and so on. And their valuations just were they'd skyrocketed. But ultimately, as soon as we came out of COVID, the fundamentals of the business aren't there to support that valuation. So you just suddenly see either mass down rounds or a quick acquisition because you just can't keep raising capital. I think it also depends on what territory you're in as well. Coming from a UK, Europe-centric startup ecosystem, it's a much more conservative space. So valuations are not going to be high because the amount of capital that they're willing to put in is not as high. At an early stage, at a pre-seed for 4 or 5 million pre-money, you've got your work cut out for you for the next round because you need to demonstrate like every single metric that is going to support a valuation of 10 million, because that's realistically what you want to grow. You want to be doubling up. Conversely, over-diluting is just the exact opposite. You don't have enough runway to get you to Series B where you will then still be in control of your company. As soon as that happens, motivation of the founder just suddenly dips because now it's all about board mechanics. No fund would want to invest into you in that early stage. Unfortunately, there are a lot of funds that would be quite predatory, protecting their interests. That's totally fine. But as a founder, you would just need to be aware of that. And you need to make the right call for you and for the business. You know, that adage of like a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, right? It's like, if you don't have any other options, then maybe you would consider this. And I think a lot of funds know this as well. So that's unfortunate. But as a founder, the best thing that you can do is to work fast, is to just throw everything at the wall. If it fails, that's great, because that's the mentality of the business model. They want you to throw it all at the wall, see if it sticks, the spaghetti, see if it sticks. And then if it doesn't, just move on. Like, there are more businesses to be made and technology is moving so fast. Like, it's that mentality for a reason. Now, whether or not we agree with that is a different matter.
We've talked about this, yeah. I want to quickly touch on the UK versus US market because we've talked about this before. So you mentioned the UK, there's a smaller pot of money. They're a little bit more conservative as compared to the US. So would you recommend founders start in the US or the UK, or depends?
I think the UK Europe scene is incredible. I have limited exposure on the US side. But from the UK Europe side, I've just seen such incredible efforts to build community and to build a network of like mentors and advisors in the ecosystem that can support founders. There are going to be trade-offs, a little less capital, but if you are tied geographically to this area, this is the space to do it. There's so much capital. There is so much capital floating about that needs to be allocated into, fantastic projects. I would never suggest to somebody to go US or UK unless they've like exhausted the territory that they're currently in. I would say there's definite scope for taking a business to the US, but there's so many hoops that you would have to jump through, right? Have you raised money in the UK? Okay, does that invalidate the tax, benefits for your current investors by going to the US? That's the UK Delaware flip. You just have to go through all of these other things, which takes you away from building the business.
Yeah.
This is the main thing as well. I think like fundraising is this exercise of selling yourself and selling the business, but you have to also somehow build the system to support the business at the same time. I find that really challenging.
Because I was going to ask you, there's a lot there. So there's the piece around tactically, how did you get your investors? And I would love to hear that. And then there's the piece of, okay, I've gotten my investors, then now I have to build the thing. And then also in the interim, like I also have to keep building this business. It's like simmering on the back. And how do you manage everything? So there's a lot there. If you can indulge me, we can start with the tactical piece of like, how did you get your first investors and what did that look like?
Yeah. I had always known that I wanted to do something in mental health. So I was already like, right, I'm really fixed on mental health. I fortunately found like a day zero investor. So Antler, shout out Antler, best platform for anybody jumping into venture to try and build and start up their business. It gives you community, which I literally tout day after day as like being the strongest piece of being a founder, like not being alone, being surrounded by other founders. It gives you access to that first ticket of capital. It's not much, but it's going to get you going. And if you don't have access to angel investors, you don't come from money already, like these are the things that I didn't have access to. So I needed to get an intro into the world, be invited to the table, so to speak. And Antler gave that to me, which I'm so eternally grateful for.
Yeah.
So Antler itself is like a 12-week accelerator. You're trying to find a co-founder, develop your business idea, and then build your pitch deck and then demonstrate your traction. So that's the runway that we went on. And so over the course of 12 weeks, my co-founders and I, we built our first thesis and presented it, and then we got our ticket. So that was the first one. But then very quickly, just like you would see with folks who raise through YC, through Y Combinator, once you're in a network that has built up some prestige, investors start coming to you. So we had operators from Uber, other funds, all coming in and actually wanting to speak to us. And that was just so transformational. Like, I'd never experienced anything like that.
Yeah.
And then you start building up either angel tickets or other funds come in with small tickets. That's how you build your round. Tactically, though, if you don't have one of these platforms or day zero investors like Antler, you could look for other accelerators. It's always good to be part of both a movement and a community. I'd say like that. If you were tactically fundraising, find people, find a network, and like grow together. That's step one. Step two, don't fundraise for too long. Because if you are not building your business, you're going to struggle to demonstrate the traction that's required to show that you're building the systems required to operate the business. And I think that's one of the hardest journeys that founders will go through. Not only are you trying to find that business model is for you, but you need to build all the systems that support you to do it day in, day out. But if you're still tied to the business on the day to day, you're going to really struggle with the fundraising. They say fundraising, and I can attest, fundraising is like a 2-person job. Take on 2 jobs and you're running the business. You're going to be stretched thin. Burnout is just like a ticking time bomb at that point.
That was really, really helpful. I guess the question I have for you is, how did you also choose which investors you're going to accept money from? Because sometimes as a founder, you can be like, oh, you're giving me money, I'm just going to take anything I get. But you also have to be so strategic about who you're bringing on board. Because if you want to separate from an investor, it's like, I've heard it's harder than a divorce. So you want to be really, really, really choosy, but it can be hard to be choosy when someone's waving a check around. So how did you choose who you were going to allow to invest into your company?
Yeah. So I would say it's about, what does the fund represent? What are their values? What's their thesis? What are the support mechanisms in place to support the founders? What is the network like? How do they add value? Because I really do believe in the ethos of, they're investing in you and the business, but they're on your side. You're in it together because you're trying to both make a mutual return on this investment. What I've often seen is when I've seen like friends who have fallen out with their investors, and it's not the ideal situation,
of course.
Right? So how do you avoid that? You just have to do your own due diligence, just as the fund is assessing you and they're conducting their due diligence. Go speak to the other founders that are on that portfolio. Get referrals from other founders. That's number one. Other VCs also, they know the people. I would say it's a very known community. Everybody has met each other once or twice or knows each other or does joint deals with each other. You want to find out what has gone wrong. When something has gone wrong, how has the fund responded and what was the situation around it? So things like co-founder breakups or big pivots in the business, how they act when it comes to the next round, or when you're running out of runway, how do they respond? These are the big problems that you need support on. Those are the things that you need to hear real testimony and experiences from other founders to know how it works. But also, within a few conversations with partners and associates, you very quickly know whether or not you're going to gel with them. And that's also really important. It's how are you going to get along working with them? Because as you said, it's like a marriage. If it breaks down, that's important. It's, you're building a relationship and you're on the same team. So that's always look at problems together. And that's more relationship advice.
That is literally relationship advice as well. Yeah. That's so funny. Okay, that's very, very helpful. And I think, see if they can add value. Look at what happens when things go wrong. How do they react? How do they resolve the situation? And then see if it's a good personality fit as well. Because you're having calls with them every single week, probably touching base with them maybe monthly or quarterly or whatever it is. So they are in your life and you want to make sure that you get along.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay. And then on the actual fundraising portion, you said don't fundraise for too long. So what do you think is an ideal time frame to be like, okay, I'm going to give it my all for, is it 6 months? Is it a year? What do you think?
For Kalda, we had a very disrupted fundraising process. And, very, very lightly, we don't have to delve into it too much, but, my dad died in the middle of a funding round. So I immediately took a month break and I was not going to go fundraising. And so then I had to basically almost restart myself as I came back into things. So that was a huge gap. There are different stages. When you find your lead investor, that can be quite quick. and you want that to be quick. That's a good signal. But then the rest of the round needs to kind of follow suit. And that is what took me longer to try and pull together. That's when I learned so much more about fundraising, because I had always thought that once you got a lead investor, like that was it. Absolutely not.
Done.
Yeah, done. Absolutely not. So I would say that there are a few guiding principles that I developed that would set you off on the right path. So firstly, I would just say you've got two objectives in the first foray into fundraising. One would be you're trying to close out as much of the capital as possible, or you're trying to secure a lead investor. Often you want to have somebody who's going to do all of the terms, like who's going to go through all the legal work, and that would be your lead investor. Sometimes you just can't find it, but you can bring in the rest of the round. You either get a good signal that you've got that, or the alternative route is that you've closed a lead investor. And I would give yourself 3 to 4 months to do one of those two paths. If you haven't, stop fundraising immediately, go back to the product. For me, secured like an offer of investment within 3 months. And so then it was bringing the rest of the round. Here's where you can actually start thinking a little bit more aggressively and tactically to say that you're closing the round. So now the shift of like negotiations starts to swing in your favor. In the two scenarios, you've either got all of the capital kind of soft committed, or you've got a lead investor. Now you need to create urgency and close your round as fast as possible. Time kills all deals. All of these sayings, it's all there for good reason. So if you've got the secured capital, you need to now try and convert one of those into your lead. What I've come to learn is that I think as a generation, on the younger side of the millennials, we're so used to texting and emailing and like letting things flow. No, stop it. Stop it right now. You're picking up the phone and you are like demanding answers from people as fast as possible to create a sense of speed. You're trying to convert one into a lead. You've got another decision tree to make here, which is you either convert one or you don't. And then maybe you want to set the terms. And I would actually say, as a more general point of view, you should always have your terms outlined to begin with. That's what you're going for. Often an investor will ask, oh, what's your valuation? They're doing that mental checklist of, does this make sense against this valuation that they've asked for? And that can often kill a deal like then and there. Because if we go back to like the overvalued or you've undervalued, like something's up. You need to have in mind like what your ideal term sheet would look like. And sometimes you can just say like, these are the terms, like this is our term sheet. Are you signing up for this? But you've got to work hard. In the other scenario where you've got a lead, now it's about creating the urgency to close the round. So you're just saying like, here's a line in the sand, we're closing a round, who's in? The best thing that any founder can do, or at least that I've learned, is to walk away. And I know that the temptation is like, no, I've got to keep it open. I've got to keep going. But if you can't hold strong on that, I think you don't really create the urgency. That's what I did.
Yeah. And I think that's really, really helpful, because in the fundraising mentality, sometimes you can start by being, okay, here are my terms. This is what I want. I'm not going to settle. And then as time passes, and maybe if things are slow, as things are right now a little bit in some markets, and you don't start getting that traction, you can start to get almost like a little bit more desperate. And then it's like, you also have to remember though, you're giving people an opportunity to make money. Like, yes, they're giving you money, but it's an investment. And so as a result of that, you're hot shit, and you need to act like you're hot shit and have that confidence. So I love what you're saying around creating urgency. It's like, okay, here's the line in the sand. The round stops next month or whatever. We're done. So you're either in or you're out. If you're in, that's great. This is what the terms are going to look like. But it's really, really important you bring that up, because I think first-time founders, if they're first doing their pre-seed round, it's like you can waffle, be a little bit uncertain. And so it is really important to have that confidence.
Yeah. So I would class myself as like a first-time venture-backed founder. But the reason that I totally get why a second-time founder is so much more dangerous, gone through certain processes, they've gone through certain journeys of understanding, of building under a venture model, like how to work at speed, how to pull yourself out of the business, how to create systems around you that support the business like flourishing, that allows you to then sell the business, to raise funding, to operate as a CEO versus the person in it, like the person doing the work. I think that's definitely been the hardest journey that I've been on personally throughout the process, pulling myself out of the business. Really amazing piece of advice that I got really early on is like, okay, your job is to get the job done, not do the job. I always kind of reflect on that. Probably when things are taking too long and I've realized that I've taken on too much. I was like, hang on, no. I need to get the job done, not to do it.
That makes a lot of sense. I really like that too. It's a good reminder. My job is to get the job done, not to do the job.
Yeah. And very much like bleary-eyed.
I know, like, you're like eyes switching. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to talk about is I'm so sorry that your dad passed while you were doing the middle of your fundraise. That must have been incredibly stressful and incredibly heartbreaking. And so how did you manage your own mental health throughout that? What was that process like?
I think I had like this understanding from having spoken to a few other founders and as well my investors. Like, I thank my investors so much for their kindness and compassion during that time. A dear friend of mine, Kim, and one of my other investors, Henry, sat me down and they were just like, okay, this is what I went through. They had lost a loved one as well. Knowing that I wasn't alone in this experience, that's number one that helps. Secondly, I guess they kind of just shared like, it will feel like this type of time length. It will feel like 2 years before you go in and sort out and process it. One thing that Kim shared with me, so loving, which was, the memories that like will bring you to tears will in time make you smile. And I guess that was something to look forward to, but also it was like really like upsetting at the time. But now I get it. And it's like every time I'm grateful to have those memories now. I'm just like, oh, what a beautiful reminder. What a gift to have that memory. Shout out to my investors, all of my investors. They were just so compassionate and patient. It was really, really interesting because 2 months after my dad died, that's when I met my lead investor. So I'm trying to pitch to my lead investor all the while, like just navigating grief. And I was blessed with the kindness of one of my friends who like got me into the London Marathon. So I did a bunch of fundraising for lung cancer, was like running the London Marathon at the same time as like fundraising. And it was just, I don't know, there's a lot going on. And even my prospective lead investor, we got to know each other through that experience as well. And I had a real goal. So I remember like just days before my dad died, like I got to the hospital and like he grabbed my hand and he was like, how's the fundraise going? And I'm like, why are you asking me this question of all the things you could ask me right now? Ask me how the fundraise is going. And I was like, yeah, we did it. Don't worry, Dad. We raised the money. And I could tell that this lie that I told, he just saw right through me and he was like, yeah, good. I owed it to him to go execute on that because he's been so supportive of me throughout my life and particularly in building Kalda. Like he just knew how much it meant to me and he supported me like non-stop. One of the nice things that he would do is that he would always like send me emails like of anything like LGBTQ plus related and mental health related. He was just sending me things on email and I won't get that anymore. But I had a really clear goal. I'd lied to my dad, but I needed to validate myself in front of that lie. Yeah. And so I was just like, I am doing this fundraise. Like, I am making this happen. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't care how long it's going to take. I am going to do it. And I think that clarity in a way just like saw me through to the end of the fundraise. Although I definitely had like a moment, the stress and the overwhelm of it like got too much because I was identifying so much with that like target, verging on the burnout areas. Wasn't until like my dear friend Aidan from Next 10, he then like kind of pulled me to one side and said like, you just need an off ramp. And I would say that this is another fundamental of fundraising that I've developed is like giving yourself the grace to walk away from the whole fundraise, allowing yourself to walk away from it when it all feels too much and it's all getting too much, and allows you to like regulate and bring down that stress level. How did I raise money in the hardest VC landscape ever, be grieving for a parent and like have one singular goal? But the focus and the mentality that you need to like fundraise sometimes is it's a 2-person job. If you're only one person, how are you going to do it? Like you just have to give everything. And I would say it's not healthy in some areas. How do you bring in a healthier mentality into this process? This is kind of what I'm like developing now and looking outwardly to the future of either our next round or so on to like, how do we do this in a way that doesn't burn out a founder in the process?
Thank you for sharing that. And instead of saying that it was maybe a lie you told to your dad, I almost feel like it's this promise you made to him and to yourself. And you had told him this, so you wanted to be committed to it and see it through. And it just gave you that one track mind so that you could just focus, go all out, do it. And I think it's incredible you were able to pull this off. And I think it's so amazing and it's no small feat. But at the same time, I also recognize how difficult that must have been, how stressful that must have been, how overwhelming that must have been. And so, yeah, I mean, just props to you. And I'm really, really proud of you. I want to talk about, I guess, that process. So obviously, hopefully the listeners will not have to go through grief as they're fundraising because that seems intense. But you did mention that as you're fundraising, it's a 2-person job, plus you have to run your business. So that's like a 3-person job one person's trying to do. And so how do you think folks can best manage that now? Because it is a ticket to burnout, but it doesn't have to be. So what do you think you might try in the future, or what have you seen maybe friends do?
Every piece of advice that I've sought around this is how to create systems. I think it's very easily said. I think it's much harder in practice. But ultimately, if you just break apart your entire business into very specific jobs to be done, these are the things that you need other people to do for you. And that's what the capital's there for. You need to prioritize that list, and you need to prioritize it towards like the revenue making sides of the business, right? That's the most important part. So what are the systems that are going to help you create sustainable revenues, even if it's break even? But how are you reducing your burn rate in order to allow you the space and the time to go out there and fundraise?
And I think that's a good segue into us working together. So I've had the privilege of getting to know you, I think, on a deeper level because I'm now working with you on your baby. And I think that's always like next level friendship where you get to see what your friend is working on and what they're so passionate about. But that's been so fun. And through that process, I have tried to help you prioritize what the goals are, because as a founder that's in the weeds, a lot of the times we can just do a bunch of stuff and throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall, which is great. But you also want to be cognizant of the fact that you have limited time, limited energy, and limited resources.
Yeah.
And we do have a burn rate that is burning every single day.
We do.
It's ticking. And so we need to be really ruthless about what you're working on. And so in this season now, what are your priorities right now? What's your new one-track focus with Kalda?
My one-track focus for Kalda right now is like really fine-tuning our business model. Like, I'm proud that we have launched the first clinically backed like program on anxiety and depression. That's been great, but I think we've hit the wall of like the current business model of how it was designed. Going for that subscription base, it's digital therapy on demand. It's just a distribution model for how we're doing it. It hasn't quite clicked and connected in the way that we would want it to achieve mass scale, right? That's also the balancing thing. That's the useful framework that you've tried to help me develop here, which is if our goals are to do this type of scale, then we need to drastically change the way that we're delivering our thesis into the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I just really believe in you in is the problem you're trying to solve. So do you want to talk about the problem a little bit?
So the problem is that the queer community is disproportionately affected by mental health issues, 3 times more likely to experience things like anxiety and depression. Particularly any marginalized identity will have this issue. And this is because of minority stress. This is because of the predominant society around us does not match who we are, which creates those areas of stress like microaggression in day-to-day life. But then we're also more disproportionately affected or the access to relevant mental health support. In the UK, if we were to go publicly, we've got wait lists of up to 2 years for mental health support. A general population will experience like 6 to 8 weeks of wait list. For queer specific mental health support, like that just goes through the roof. And for particularly for like gender identity services, it's up to 2 years on a wait list. 2 years, no support, no check-ins, no understanding of timelines of, when are you going to be seen next? So then the alternative route is to go privately. Therapy as a whole is a relatively unregulated landscape. Anybody can call themselves a therapist. Anybody can call themselves a coach. These are really difficult things to navigate if you're under stress and you're experiencing symptoms and you want to try and find help. Where do you seek support? I love that there are so many professional bodies out there of people who have created standards and associations, but still these aren't protected terms. So then when you go into the other level, you've got psychiatry and clinical psychologists as protected terms. Go to med school. You have to do that in order to be able to call yourself that. That's fine. On a therapist level, then you could pay anything from £50 to £200 an hour to go and speak to a therapist, psychotherapist. This is the price of accessing that level of support. I think it's 40% of queer folk cannot afford that for longer than a month.
Of course, it's expensive, yeah.
Private therapy is expensive, right? And the typical lifetime value of that relationship is going to be 1 to 2 years with a therapist. So that's a lot of cash. And that hasn't even scratched the surface on actually relevant support.
Yeah.
So then we have accessing support that is relevant to you. So 1 in 4 folks in the community experience discrimination from healthcare staff. That's published by Stonewall in their kind of LGBTQ+ in Britain healthcare report. And so when navigating folks who are supposed to be in the positions of fiduciary care, you don't know if you're going to be discriminated against.
Yeah.
And also you're lacking the relevant lived experience in some cases. People want to find therapists that either mirror their identity or they have come from the same similar background or experiences. Culturally competent care is like the big buzzword. It's about finding culturally competent care. So that's what Kalda is trying to solve. We're trying to provide immediate access to mental health support. We're trying to democratize access to it by making it as affordable as possible. And then finally, to make it as relevant to folks through either personalization or through working with therapists with the relevant lived experience.
Well, it's such important work, and that's why I felt so called to work with you and to help you on this mission, because there's not a lot of options for folks out there. It's either super, super expensive and only reserved for people that can afford it. But then if they can't afford it, it's so heartbreaking because this is a segment of the population that really does need a lot more support. And not only that, they need the right support, because if people aren't qualified, I could see it being also very dangerous where you're getting bad advice or you're feeling even worse about yourself. So it is so, so, so important. And so felt very called to work with you. And then we're tackling this huge problem, which is so important. And then the solution piece is the piece we've been working on a lot on, because it's really important to have a problem, but then the solution also needs to fix this problem. But not only that, you need to be able to monetize off of it. It needs to be profitable. It needs to work. It needs to be scalable. Yes, you could have so many different solutions to solve this problem, but it has to be the right solution for you. And that's really where we've started the basis of our work. And then once you have that solution, it's like, okay, how do we scale it? How do we get it out there?
That's right.
Yeah. And so right now it's a mental health app. I went through the app and it's so good. And then I remember talking to you and being like, I think this is low-key 2 different products. And then you were like, oh, this is why it's been so hard. This is why I've been so stressed, because I've been building 2 products. And I'm like,
yep. And I remember like thinking to myself, like the one thing that I want to do is to try and simplify the app and just make sure that I'm only building one thing. But I completely lost sight, classic founder trap of like, oh, just build this other feature. Oh, build this other feature. Yeah. And suddenly I've got 2 apps in front of me, but I didn't even realize it until, taking that objective look at it. And I think that's the value of an advisor, an outside source with more experience who can kind of say like, have you considered this?
Crazy thought. And we've covered a lot of stuff. We've gone through your product, we've gone through your branding, we've gone through your sales funnel, we've gone through your marketing. It's been quite a lot, but I guess throughout all of that, what were some of your big takeaways or big lessons you've learned?
I would say on the marketing side and the branding, like it's something that is consistently evolving. But in order to like develop a brand, it needs to be consistent. Be consistent in your messaging, but then also allow it to evolve either naturally, or we did a massive rebrand and allow it that space to just to exist, to fine tune it, allow it to breathe. I think I often get caught in the trap of like perfectionism, where it's like I want everything to be perfect before we launch something, but that's not the reality. Like we don't have enough time for things to be perfect, right? So we have to chart a course forward as most informed as possible, and then like adapt as we go.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then how about on like the sales or the product side of things?
And then on the sales side, the biggest takeaway is that I've realized through working with you is I feel like I've been pushing a boulder up a mountain in terms of the way that we wanted to build the business model. I think we were trying to like re-engineer consumer behavior and like really radically think about like how people would want to access our therapy. I've been tied to this idea of like wanting it to be a mobile app, wanting it to exist as an app that you see out there and is as accessible as possible. but it's a completely different proposition. It's a completely different consumer proposition, learning platform than what you would have as a mobile app. Our contemporaries, when we looked at the market, you're looking at the Headspaces and the Calms, but they're a completely different business. Meditation versus therapy. I think that's the trap, is like too closely mirror potential competitors out there. And so that's the thing that you've stopped me and like pulled me out of. So I'm really excited about the next step.
Because to your point, as founders, sometimes you can go into it being like, I think it's an app, or I think it's a website, or I think it's a product, or whatever it is. But I just simply pulled you out of it and was like, okay, what's the vision? What's the mission here? What do we actually want the solution to be that we're solving the problem for? And then how are your target consumers going about this already, so that we don't have to force consumer behavior, to your point? When people think about an app, what are they using it for, and how much are they willing to pay for it, and what are your monetization opportunities? So it's almost having a vision of what it could look like, but not being too married to it if it just doesn't make sense from like a consumer perspective or a monetization perspective.
Yeah, that has been such a valuable takeaway. It's been the hardest to like accept, right? Because you get so fixated on a direction for a period of time. And you're like, but actually what's most important is like, how are people going to access it in the way that they are accustomed to, in the way that they need it as well.
Yeah.
And I think that you lose sight of sometimes when you come from a very techie space and you're like, let's build this app, let's build this code, let's develop this platform. And it's been really useful.
Taking a step back. Yeah. And I think that's so important. So with all that being said, if someone was thinking of potentially working with me, what would you say to them?
I have thoroughly enjoyed working with you and still working with you. What I have gained is very actionable insight and actively you taking a look at things. I think that's something that I have missed in other working relationships with folks, that they haven't actually looked at the product. And it's been more about either the coaching or like the person, the two almost like one and the same in like a pre-seed startup phase. It's like you need something that is really going to take a look at the cold, hard unit economics of the business. And that's what you've done. And you've done that very quickly and has given me space to actually action on those things. So that's been great.
Yeah, I mean, like I always want to come in and see what we're working with before I'm going to do a recommendation. Your advisors or consultants should always get a very thorough understanding of you, your business, your goals before they can provide a recommendation. Otherwise, it can be really harmful if they don't understand fully what's going on. Yeah,
I agree. And I think every good advisor that I've worked with has asked me to like, produce that list of like, what are all the jobs that are needing to be done right now? What are you looking at? Then ruthlessly prioritizing that and helping you stay accountable to that. That's something that you've done. I myself as a founder have just fallen into certain traps of thinking that everything needs to be done. That's the thing that I am learning and going through, right? Like just if I write a 10 item to-do list, just rip paper in half and just focus on the top 3. That's it.
Yeah. Again, the job for you is to get the job done, but not do the job.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, wrapping things up now, let's do some quick fire rounds. What's the best advice you've ever received, and what's the worst advice you've ever received?
I think the best advice I've ever received was what I mentioned. Your job's to get the job done.
Yeah, love that.
Not to do it. The worst advice I've ever received, I would actually say, is just live in a world of abundance. You're focusing on the wrong things. You shouldn't be managing like runway and burn. And I'm like, no, absolutely, you should be. It's very difficult to raise rounds. And unless you've got the metrics to like back up the next round, for example, like you need to take things quite realistically. You can still be in that space of abundance in different areas of time, different sprints, so to speak. But like just to throw cash, I think when you're not in Silicon Valley is like a recipe for disaster. I've just seen too many founders just burn through their capital because they are not managing their burn.
Yeah. Once you get an influx of cash, you can easily just be like, I'm going to spend money on everything, advertising, hiring people. But to your point, you do still have to be so intentional and conscious about what you're spending money on. Act like this is money that is not in your bank account, of course, like this is the business money. And so you want to make sure there's an ROI on it. But then at the same time, of course, as you're going out in fundraising, you can still be abundant. But I do agree it's so dangerous to just be like, oh, money will come, customers will show up, investors will come. Like you still have to be so intentional about it.
Yeah, it's really heads down. Like once you've closed a round, like it's like now deliver on the plan. In order to make the right steps, yes, you do need to deploy the capital. That's been one of the wonderful lessons I've learned, is building the muscle to actually deploy capital, but you're doing it intentionally, consciously.
Yeah.
It's exactly what funds want from you to get the job done, not to do the job. But it also needs to be done in context of your total runway. Are you building this business because you're building it? Or are you just throwing it at the wall in a venture way where it's all about the speed of execution? Abundance is fantastic, but you have to be doing it in the context of the wider round. Where I am in my journey right now, there is nothing certain. Startups do fail more than they succeed. With nothing being certain, just blindly believing in abundance has been a challenging one. It wasn't a quick fire answer.
No, but it makes sense. The quick fire Cliff Notes edition of this is abundance without context is dangerous.
Yeah.
And that's it. Okay. And then last question, how are you taking care of yourself in this season?
Being more intentional about my breath. Just noticing that when I'm in a challenging situation, I notice that my breaths get shorter. And so being aware of that allows me to just take deeper inhales and everything's all right. So how am I taking care of myself? More holidays. Yeah, trying to really switch off. The best thing that you can do. And I think that's a sign of a business being in a good space where I'm able to actually switch off and know that the business is like operating, being run fine.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to worry about. I would actually say that would be my goal for every founder, to like get into that position as fast as humanly possible.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Dan, for coming on and sharing your journey and being so candid and vulnerable. I really, really appreciate it. And I know it's going to be very helpful for everyone.
Thank you, Selena. It's been an absolute joy and I love working with you. So
yay. I'll link everything of Dan's below. But yeah, thank you so much. And that's a wrap on this episode of Confessions of a Conscious CEO. I hope you got a lot out of this episode. If you did, it would mean the world if you subscribed on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify and left a rating and review to help more conscious founders discover this show. It would also make my day if you shared this episode to your Instagram stories or LinkedIn and tagged me at Selena Ho or at Confessions of a Conscious CEO. Always cheering you on, and I cannot wait to see what you built from this.